Okay, so let's kickstart. Good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to see all of you while we're still waiting people who is joining us. Let's start with records to the time. So we are really very pleased to welcome you on this webinar dedicated to SFDR together with Fabio. Before we begin, let me maybe go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All attendees automatically you're muted and your video is turned off by default. Please use the QA box, which you see on the Zoom bottom of your screen. It's important because this is the practical session. And if you have a question regarding SFDR PAI, please don't hesitate to use the moment and ask us questions. We receive a lot of questions before. We structure presentation based on your questions and we try to cover as much as possible. So please go ahead and ask. If you have any issues, technical or comments, use the chat, which you can also see. Please note that this webinar is going to be recorded and the recording will be shared with registered participant after the session, as well as a survey will be sent over. We're also streaming this event live on LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you have any technical issues, also don't hesitate to message us. So good, let me click the button record and we will start. Let me introduce our guest. I'm really very much excited to have Fabio with us. Fabio is associate at Legance and he's the part of ESG impact team. On daily basis, Fabio works with sustainability related issues, assisting companies and financial intermediaries on legal aspects, and it's all regarding ESG, human rights, and impact investing. Also, Fabio is a member of the working group on SFDR of Invest Europe, and he collaborates with Teresia, the research center of the Politecnico di Milano. Fabio, I'm really very honored to have you with us and tackle the most challenging question on SFDR practical part. So stage is yours, Fabio.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good morning, everyone. First of all, let me share the screen. And we have some slides, of course. So, Anna, please just tell me if you can see the slides. Nice. So, here we are. First of all, it is a pleasure to be here to share some insights with all of you on the SFDR regulation. But we also wanted to share some more general knowledge about the regulatory framework, because I think it's very important to understand how the ESG regulatory framework in general is connected and how the SFDR is just a piece of this legislation. So we'll take some minutes, few minutes to explain this general framework. And then we will deep into the SFDR requirements to be also very practical in this webinar. And I will take some last 10 minutes to share also some insights on supervisory expectations and how this regulatory framework is evolving. And then we will have also some time for the questions. So let's start. This is the first slide that we usually use to explain how far we went with the ESG regulatory framework. We are going to deep today the SFDR regulation. This is the first pillar, as we refer to it, and you find it on the left side of the slide in the blue box. This is the regulation that for the first time in 2019 provided for sustainability reporting disclosure obligation for all financial intermediaries. The second leg of the regulatory framework that we are also going to comment today is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's in the middle of this slide. This is the second leg because the same disclosure obligation have been made clear for companies. And also, in this sense, for the investees. The third leg of the regulatory framework on sustainability of the European Union is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive on the right side of this slide. And this introduces due diligence obligation, so with reference of referring to the supply chain. And we also have two yellow boxes. These are the regulatory technical standards to comply with this regulatory framework. So we have the RTS, the Delegated Regulation 1288 of 2022. This was made to express how to comply with the disclosure obligation of SFDR. And we find a lot of practical insights in this regulation. And it's very also important to understand that in some way there is a lot of flexibility on how to use and to comply with this delegated regulation. And we will see this. The second technical standard is the European Sustainability Reporting Standards. The intent of this regulatory tool was to express how to comply with the corporate sustainability reporting disclosures obligation of a CSRD. Just one last comment. We know, I think, that we all know that the CSRD and the CS3D have been also postponed right now by the omnibus. So everything is changing in relation to these two directives, but it's very important to take into mind that they do exist. They are useful tools also to comply with the finance disclosure regime. Now, let's deep the first pillar of this regulatory regime. That is the SFDR. Some more general information to understand what we are dealing with. The SFDR intent was to avoid greenwashing in the sustainable finance sector. How? Providing key definitions. And we are also going to comment some of these definitions. But before, let me share also some innovative aspects that from our point of view as legal experts, legal practitioners, are very important of these regulations. The cogency. I mean, for the first time, disclosing on sustainability has been made an obligation. And this also was an obligation for all financial actors. For example, all asset managers. So it's very important to understand the extension of this obligation as well. And another important character is what we call it, the three-dimensionality, because this regulation provides for disclosure obligation on three key aspects, not only environmental factors, environmental aspects, but also social and governance profiles. And we will also deep, especially the governance profile in few slides. Another innovative aspect is the double materiality, because such disclosure has to be made clear on two perspectives. The first one is the external perspective. So, for example, which are the positive or negative impact of the investing activity on the external, so on sustainability factors, and we will see now what we mean by sustainability factors. And then we have the internal perspective, perhaps the most important for the operator, for the financial operator, because it has been made to understand how sustainability risks affect the financial returns of the financial operator. Now, some key definitions that were provided by this regulation and that we are going to use today. Sustainability factors. This is important to understand, as we said before, the external perspective of the regulation. And it means every environmental, social, employee matters, but also respect for human rights, anti-corruption matters, and anti-bribery matters. The sustainability risk definition, it's important for the internal perspective of these regulations, and means, again, every environmental, social, or governance event or condition that can in some way impact on the value of an investment. We have also another key definition that we extrapolate from the regulation, because it is not expressly included in the regulation, but is ESG investment. By this term, we are referring to those funds that under the regulation are in some way promoting environmental or social characteristics during the investment activities. We also call these funds Article 8 funds, because this is the article that defines such investment strategy. So the two terms that we can use is Article 8 funds or ESG investment. Sustainable investment, instead, are those investments that respect some very specific rules. For example, they do not significantly harm any sustainable objective, and they follow good governance practices, but they also, as an investment strategy, contribute to an environmental or social objective. So now that we have understood a little bit more about this regulation, the SFDR, let's go deep into the requirements, and I will also try to share some practical insights on how we, for example, assist clients in dealing with these requirements. So in these slides, we are referring to the specific articles of the regulation, the kind of focus that such obligation has, and what is requested. So let's begin with Article 3 and Article 6. These two articles are very important because they are focusing on the risk side of what we have commented before. What is requested is to be very transparent on how both, this is important, both the asset manager and the single fund are integrating sustainability risk into their investment decisions. Where we have to be transparent, first of all, on the web, and secondly, on the pre-contractual disclosure. So we have a double obligation in this case. The other focus of a regulation is, we have said before, the external impact of the activity. The focus in this case is Article 4 and Article 7 of the regulation. What is requested in this case is to be transparent on the principal adverse impact, this is the definition, of the investment activity on sustainability factors. And this kind of transparency, it's again requested both on the web and in the pre-contractual disclosures of each fund. So again, we have an obligation, a transparency obligation at both the manager and fund level. Let me immediately say that there is a comply or explain regime. What we mean by this? That the asset manager can decide if it doesn't exceed a certain threshold to comply with its transparency obligations and to disclose its principal adverse impact. Otherwise, it cannot. It can also be not transparent on such impacts, but it shall explain why it is choosing such an approach. And then we have Article 5. Again, we are dealing with the risk profile of a sustainability in this case. And the question here is the request is to be transparent on how the asset manager, so we are at the manager level in this case, is integrating the sustainability risk into its remuneration policies, where such disclosure has to be made on the website again. And then we have Article 8 and Article 9 obligations that are complemented by Article 6 obligations. All these three articles are focusing just on the fund level. The first thing to be said is that we have under this regulation an obligation also for every fund. So it doesn't matter if, let me say, a fund has a sustainability focus, or it intends to integrate sustainability into its investment strategy. As a minimum, a fund has to be transparent on how sustainability risks are integrated into the investment decisions. And this is very important because a disclosure obligation of such an impact require also some, let's say, collecting and measuring obligation in behaviors by the asset manager. So this is requested to all funds. It has to be disclosed in the pre-contractual information. Article 8 and Article 9 instead requires some more disclosures on some aspects that an asset manager might want to integrate, so this is optional, into its investment strategy. And what is this? First of all, if we refer to Article 8, well, in this case, the fund might decide, for example, as a strategy to promote during the investment activity also not only financial returns, but also environmental or social characteristics, or a combination of the two. So in this case, the request by the legislator is to be transparent on how this kind of strategy is integrated into the investment strategy of the fund, the general investment strategy. Where to be transparent in this way? In the pre-contractual information. We also referred to these kind of products as Article 8 funds, or as we said before, the ESG investments. Article 9, instead, it's focusing on something, well, that for the market, it's another layer because it's understood as more difficult, and it's to integrate into investment strategy sustainable investments objectives. And we are going also to be more specific on the difference between an Article 8 and 9 just in few slides. But this is to comprehend that every kind of funds have to disclose its sustainability risk integration, and other funds, if they are willing to, should disclose how they promote sustainability under Article 8 or Article 9 of this regulation. Well, we also commented at the beginning of this conversation, of this webinar, that we have some technical standards to understand how to comply with the regulation. And we call these technical standards RTS, sorry. And we, in our daily activity, we refer to this regulation as the ID, or the ESG ID of funds, because it is where we can find all the sustainability information of that specific product. It's very important to understand how these technical standards are used by the market. For example, in our daily activity, when we are requested to make due diligence by investor before investing in a fund, we are also requested to check the ID, so the RTS, to understand how that fund, before being invested, is positioned under a sustainability perspective. And so we extrapolate in this slide, extrapolating it from Annex 2 of the RTS, this image. This is what every kind of Article 8 or Article 9 funds should integrate in its pre-contractual disclosure to present the sustainability profiles of its investment strategy. So by this, we can immediately understand if we are dealing with an Article 8 or an Article 9 fund, by simply checking how the funds have integrated these boxes that you are seeing. But we have made it very simple before by saying that there are these two categories of funds, Article 8 and 9, but in the reality, by reading between the lines of the regulation, we understand that we have also some more categories, because in Article 8, for example, can be a simple Article 8 or an Article 8, let's say, plus, in the meaning that that fund is not only promoting social or environmental characteristics, but for a certain portion of its investment, he decided to contribute to some environmental or social objective, as if it was in Article 9 funds. So it remains in Article 8, but some portion are aligned with the sustainable objective concept under the Article 9. So we call this kind of strange funds Article 8 plus. And then these kind of funds can also decide, it's an option, to align the sustainable investments to the EU taxonomy regime. What is the EU taxonomy regime? It's another regulation that complement the regulatory framework we commented before. In which way? By providing specific definitions and criteria, this is important, to say when an economic activity can be understood as being sustainable. So it has been also used by financial operators to say when a sustainable investment is really a sustainable investment, how to apply the same technical criteria that are specified by this regulation. So we call these kind of funds that decide to make also sustainable investments and aligned with the taxonomy regime, we call them Article 8 plus aligned. And then the same kind of reasoning can be applied to Article 9. because an Article 9 fund can decide to simply contribute to sustainable objectives, but it can also decide to apply the taxonomy regime to say when that kind of investment is really a sustainable investment. And so we have, again, this kind of Article 9 aligned with the taxonomy. So now that we have introduced some general concepts of the SFDR regulation, we can deal more specifically with these two kind of key concepts, that of social and environmental characteristics, and that of sustainable objectives. We have made some examples in the middle of this slide, just examples, of what can be understood to be a social and environmental characteristics or a sustainable objective. But what is important to understand here is that the language is very similar. If we read through these lines, the concept, the sustainability concepts underlying these characteristics or objectives are very similar. So what is the difference, the real difference in a practical way between these kind of products, an Article 8 or an Article 9? Well, it's the investment strategy, for example, and it is also what is requested by the law, what is mandatory, because under an Article 8 product, it is requested to promote such an environmental or social characteristics, but this is mandatory even for just a portion of all the investments. So it's up to the fund decide if all the investments are going to be aligned with this concept or just a portion of it. So even a 10% of a portfolio could be linked to this promotion of environmental and social characteristics. So there is an incentive by the market and not by the regulation to promote environmental social characteristics, and it's up to the asset manager to decide in what kind of level to integrate this promotion in the investment strategy. It's a market choice, let's say that. And we also know, just to share some insights, how the market in the last few years have been focusing the financial market on sustainability, because this integration of risk, sustainability risk into the investment strategy, this promotion of characteristics or pursuing of sustainable investment is seen as a value into investment strategy. Instead, in Article 9 products differentiate from an Article 8, because in this case, the legislator requests that all the portfolio, so the 100% of investments, are aligned with the concept that we commented before of sustainable investments. So all the investment should be aligned with this concept. And under an Article 9 product, so I mean, to be aligned with this sustainable investment concept, the requirements are to contribute to a sustainable objective. But here we have some flexibility because the asset manager can choose its sustainable objectives. The second requirement is to respect good governance practice. It means, and we will see that into detail in some more minutes, but it means that every kind of investee shall respect what under this regulation is understood to be a good governance standard. The third requirement for an Article 9 is, we said it at the beginning, to not harm any other sustainability objectives. And we are going to see how to deal with this obligation. Instead, an Article 8 shall just promote characteristics and, again here, respect the good governance requirement. principal adverse impact. Said it at the beginning of this conversation, but there is not an obligation for asset managers to be transparent on how its investing activity is affecting externally sustainability factors. So there is just an obligation to comply or to explain why we are not complying with this transparency obligation. But it is also important to understand why it could be an opportunity for asset managers to decide to comply with this obligation. So we try to express it here in this slide. And first of all, under our point of view, considering the principal adverse impact of a fund on sustainability can be functional for two reasons. The most important one is to simplify, to support the way by which the asset manager is integrating sustainability risk in its investing activity. We said it before, this is an obligation for every asset manager, for every fund. So we know that they all have to at least integrate sustainability risk. Well, when we deal with internal functions of the asset managers, for example, the risk functions, we have been often requested how do we integrate sustainability risk? Well, one of the tools that can be used is the indicators that the regulator, the legislator, has listed as the indicators to be used to comply with the principal adverse impact regime. These indicators are included under Annex 1, if you want to go and read, of the RTS. So this is a very useful tool, I think, that could be used to manage sustainability risk. And the second function is to comply with the DNSH principle, the do not significantly harm principle, that an Article 9 shall comply with. How do we respect this requirement? How do we ensure that the investment strategy of that fund, Article 9 fund, is not significantly harming our sustainability objectives? Well, we can use the same indicators that we commented before under the PAI regime. One last comment. We should understand that in this case, when we comply with we decide to comply with the PAI regime, is not just a disclosure obligation. Because in this case, not only the fund, the asset manager, is requested to disclose such negative impact, but it shall also disclose what kind of actions, for example, it has adopted to deal with those negative impact that have exceeded some targets and in a sense are significant. So there is not just a disclosure obligation, but also a taking action obligation in this case. And this is very important to understand, especially if you are considering to comply with a PAI regime. Let's deep now the good governance principle that we said at the beginning. It's a requirement for both Article 8 and Article 9 funds. For many operators, it was hard to understand this concept because it was very general. Because if we read through the line of the delegated regulation RTS, the definition of good governance is very, very open. It's not so specific. The obligation is to describe the policy to assess good governance practices of investee companies, including with respect to sound management structures, employee relations, remuneration of staff, and tax compliance. So we have these four kind of areas to focus on our good governance verification. But that's all. We don't have any kind of other indication. I think that this is an opportunity for the asset manager because it gives a lot of flexibility to create the right internal tool to verify the good governance respect by the investee during the investment period. And this is very important because we have to create a tool that is flexible enough to not undermine the investment activity, but at the same time to comply with the requirement of the regulation. We just made some examples of what we can consider as sound management structures and etc. under in this slide. So please take it just an example. These are not provided by the legislator. And of course, they are focused also on some aspect of the Italian regulatory framework, being an Italian lawyer. Now, by this slide, we are trying to condensate the reasoning that we have made so far, integrating all the aspects we have commented into what generally is considered the investment strategy methodology of an asset manager. So we have represented all the phases of the investment activity, and we have also integrated how, under which phase all the concepts that we have commented so far, so good governance, promotion of characteristics, pursuing of sustainable investment, should be verified. For example, it is important to understand that from the beginning, the investment team should focus in the scouting and pre-screening phase on how a potential target could be aligned with the characteristics or objective of that Article 8 or Article 9 fund. And then when it is time to move further in the investment process, for example, in the screening or in the due diligence, it is the time to assess, for example, the other requirements, as we commented before, the governance, the good governance principle, or the do not significantly harm. But let me say that it's crucial to understand this. Also in the investment period, there is an obligation, a direct obligation for the asset manager to monitor the compliance of that investee with these principles. So for example, I'm a fund, an Article 8 fund. I made an investment promoting characteristics. I should verify and assess the good governance previously respect to the investment as a condition to make that investment, but I should also monitor the compliance with those standards with my internal tool that I created during the investment activity. And I should also periodically report under the SFDR on such compliance. And then in the end of my investment, I should again report on all these aspects. So in this investment phase. Now, I promised to share some comments also on the supervisory perspective, because it's important to understand that, of course, we should focus on the regulatory framework, on SFDR, but aside, at least in Italy, we have been seeing in the last months increasing supervisory activity by some authorities, for example, Bank of Italy. It all started in 2022 when Bank of Italy published the so-called supervisory expectations on the integration of, again, climate environmental risk. This was demanded to every financial intermediary, and it was focusing on understanding how the asset manager was integrating sustainability risk into its governance, business model and strategy, organizational system, risk management system. This was really an important focus for Bank of Italy, and market disclosure. We should also understand that such kind of expectations have been published immediately after the application of another regulation that we have not commented so far. It's a delegated regulation that was complementing the SFDR by introducing, indeed, some obligation for every asset manager to integrate sustainability risk into these same areas. So in this occasion, Bank of Italy was just expressing some kind of expectations on the alignment of the asset manager with that regulatory tool. It is important to understand that after the publishment of this expectation, there was immediately another request by Bank of Italy to deliver an action plan describing how the asset manager was integrating investment, was considering and integrating sustainability risk into these areas. And such an action plan had to be delivered before March 2023. And then we also had some more expectation the same year on December, because Bank of Italy published what they understood to be the good practices that they extrapolate from the action plans that they received. And they made very clear by publishing those good practices that they were expecting the asset manager to periodically update the action plan accordingly to such good practices. So we have supported, for example, clients in periodically updating such action plans. I think we can just spend 2 minutes left on how all this regulatory and market regime is evolving, because it's very important to understand that what we have commented so far is still applicable, it's valid, but it is ongoing also a review by the legislator of all the systems. And this is important, I mean, especially for someone that is considering to launch a new fund, for example. Very briefly, we have been provided with some consultations on how both the RTS regulation and the SFDR regulation should have been reviewed. After collecting some information by the market, the legislator also decided to publish some proposals. So we have already some insights on how it is evolving. We put in this slide just an example that was made it clear by the ESAs. The ESAs is a group of supervisory authorities at the European level. It was just a proposal, so it is not already a legal act, but what we found very interesting is to see that in some way, both the market, but especially the legislator, by reviewing all the system, are moving from a disclosure regime in which what you are requested is to be transparent, just that, to a labor regime. A labor regime would be an upper level because it means that the legislator is going also to define some minimum criteria for the fund to be classified under a sustainability perspective in a certain way. So by creating some category, the legislator is also providing some minimum standards that we don't have today in the regime because it's just a disclosure regime. It's just requesting, please be transparent on how you are going to implement that investment strategy. But we found without any minimum criteria. The categories that have been discussed are that of sustainable investment and strategy investments. Transition investments to support companies in their transition to a sustainable business model. And also other categories. Let me also say, we didn't put it in this slide, that we also had a report by the Sustainable Platform, a body that is supporting the European Commission in reviewing all the system. And again, in such a report was made clear by the Sustainable Platform that the proposal was to going forward with a category regime, leaving behind the disclosure regime that we actually have. The last update is that a few days ago, it was published a call of evidence by the European Commission. So a request of information on how the European Commission should review this entire regime. And the scope of this review has been made very clear. The European Commission want also to simplify the rules under such a regime. Let me conclude with this slide, and then we can leave the 10 minutes to some questions. Because we began the conversation by commenting the regulatory framework, the general regulatory framework. And we mentioned also some regulation or directives that are applying on the investment or on the investee level. Why we did that? Because under our opinion, it's very important to understand how the sustainable pillar, the SFDR, is linked potentially to the corporate and value chain pillar that we have said before have two other regulatory tools as a reference, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. We should understand the interconnection between all these regulations, because it's very important for, in my opinion, for fund managers to leverage the existence of these other tools that maybe are not applying at the fund level, but are applied at the investee level, and to leverage this connection to build what we usually call the ESG data governance, that with the help of platform like the platform made available by Generational Impact can really help and support asset manager in dealing with all these regime. How? We should understand that, for example, if the investee are in scope, still in scope of a CSRD, the asset manager could leverage obligation at the investee level to create an integrated reporting tool that is combining the obligation of the asset manager with the obligation of the investee to facilitate the transmission of the information. And in this way, that is the most important part, to protect both the companies and the the asset manager from the greenwashing risk that are underlying all these regime that we commented so far. And also, if the company is not in scope of a CSRD, the same kind of tool could be applied on an optional base, not a mandatory base, for the same purpose. And we should also understand that there are other tools, as the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, that can be used to ensure that the investee collect in a rightful way the information on sustainability on its value chain, because the same information are probably the information that the investee is transmitting to the asset manager under the SFDR regulation. So there is an incentive, again, to apply on a voluntary basis the regulatory standard that today are available at the corporate level, and this can be leveraged to create an ESG data governance that finally, in the end, is protecting both the investee, but also most importantly, the asset manager, protecting by what? By greenwashing risk. It's all about this under this regulation. And by this, Anna, I would like maybe to leave the floor to you and to collect some questions.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much, Fabio. We have a question so I would like to refer, and if any question which we still not addressed, please, you have time to address it now. Let me read. You also can see it on Q&A. So we have a first question from our attendee, where would like to ask if you could address the expectation related to pre-trade checks for SFDR Article 8 and 9 funds. So maybe quickly we can cover this point. Pre-trade checks for SFDR. Okay.
Yes. Well, I think we should focus on the fact that there is some flexibility. So again, we said it before, Anna, we have a disclosure obligation. The disclosure obligation is on how the fund, for example, promoting characteristics or contributing to investment, sustainable investment, but we don't have minimum standards. So it's up to the asset manager to create the framework. And this is very important, and I think it's an opportunity that is made like this. Just to share some examples, I think it's very important to create internal tools that can be, for example, checklists with both the characteristics or sustainable objectives that the fund has chosen, but also the other requirements. So we understood it before, we have to comply also with the good governance principle. So it's very useful that such checklist or tool is also integrated with kind of question to cover the good governance area. And finally, if you are an Article 9 fund, you should also integrate that tool with some kind of request that could be used to comply with the do not significant harm. And in my opinion, the best way to do it, but it's just a way, it's not mandatory, is to use the principal adverse impact indicators that are included under the delegated regulation. This is a way, I think, to comply with the obligation in a flexible way. And of course, this should be made prior to the investment. But let's remind it, we should also focus on the monitoring of the compliance. So the same tool could also be applied during the investment activities.
Thank you, Fabio. Next question regarding the pre-contractual disclosures. What is the frequency and where should that be published? Frequency like annually, where on the website of the fund or of the IFM as well?
Okay. Let me just, okay. The pre-contractual disclosure. Well, in this case, the pre-contractual disclosure has to be made only at the time in which the fund is in the fundraising phase. So it's the kind of document that is presented to investor to introduce every key aspect of a fund. And so the RTS, the regulation that we commented before, has specified in some annex the kind of information that have to be included in the pre-contractual. So it has to be made only in the fundraising phase of the fund. Very important to understand how delicate is that phase, because we have to present this document before the competent authority for the authorization. So there will be a check by the authority on the information that we are including in such document. That's probably the reason why we have been requested to make some legal verification on the content before being presented to the regulatory authority.
Thank you very much. Next question. Is there a difference between an ESG policy and an impact report?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, I say in my opinion because this is not something that we have a definition of under the regulation. In my understanding, usually an ESG policy, it's an underestimated tool. It's very important in my opinion because it gives the possibility to the investee to be transparent on how sustainability is integrated in the business model. So it's a key document that every company should have. It could also be, Anna, this is interesting in my opinion, a characteristic promoted by the fund. For example, the fund could include this characteristic. I will make sure that every investee will implement an ESG policy. An impact report, in my understanding, is something different by the meaning that by impact, we are referring to something more structured than an ESG report. Because in our understanding, impact is associated, for example, to impact investing. That is more associated to Article 9 funds. But in any case, I think that any kind of document that an investee decide to implement internally, called ESG report or impact report, could in some way support the activity of the asset manager and its compliance with Article 8 and 9. So important information to be transmitted to the asset manager.
Next question. On average, do the SFDR Article 8 or 9 funds perform better than Article 6? I guess I'm just reading. I guess that maybe the definition of performance, not only financial, is changing. What is your opinion, Fabio?
I do agree. I mean, I think that the evidence of what has been asked is in the market. We have an increasing number of Article 8 and 9. And I think that is not only for marketing purposes. I think that the market understood that there is a value in integrating not just risk into the investment activity that is requested to all funds, Article 6 included, but also to integrate the promotion of characteristics or the contribution to sustainable investments, because in some way that kind of integration can valorize, can bring value to the investment activity. How? For example, because promoting those characteristics or in making sure that the fund is investing in investee aligned with sustainable objectives, we are making sure that is a good investment, is an investment in a society, in a company, in an investee that is integrating itself sustainability. And so it's protecting the business from sustainability risk, for example.
Okay. We have 2 more questions, and because we are running out of the time. So if the RTS attachments change, will all reports, pre-contractual, website, and periodic disclosures needs to be updated?
The answer is we should read into the regulatory tool that will change those templates. Why I say that? Because usually, but we are not sure, when the legislator make such kind of change, it usually also introduce what we call, in a technical way, grandfathering provisions. It means that is also ensuring that this kind of change is not too much a burden for someone that, for example, has already made that disclosure, is not anymore in fundraising activity, so that disclosure, for example, is not anymore needed. I'm referring to the pre-contractual in this case. So the legislator, let me say, Anna, is aware of this. So usually we also see these kind of changes coming with grandfathering provisions to protect, I mean, to support also financial operators.
Okay. Could you please confirm which optional PAIs are most appropriate or typically reported for fund investing in real estate? Are there any sector-specific guidelines or best practices to guide the selection?
This is very technical. I would love to have some of our partners at my side because we often, you know, Anna, how we do work. We often work side by side with technical consultants. I cannot really say what kind of indicators would be most used in the real sectors. Of course, every kind of indicators related to emissions, because we do know the importance of gas emissions. But I think we should also focus in the real estate sector on the social side. So maybe I would say that I would use also the indicators under the PAI that are focusing on social matters, because we know how important they are in the real estate sector.
And let's tackle the last question we have. Pre-contractual is just one shot, but periodical disclosures must be published annually, I guess. I'm reading. Is there a deadline, 3rd of June? Is it correct?
It's correct, the assumption. The pre-contractual is one shot, and then we have a periodic disclosure. It shall be made. It depends from the internal rules of a fund. Why I say that? Because under a sustainability reporting, periodic reporting, we should make that according to the general periodic reporting of a fund. So usually funds have a regulation expressing when such periodic reporting, general periodic reporting, shall be made available to investors. Well, under a sustainability perspective, the annex provided by the regulation should be attached to that regulatory, periodic, general periodic reporting. So it depends from the rules of each fund.
So I know that it's a very hot topic, and it's never-ending question and there, discussion about SFDR on the way how the funds needs to apply investing investors, LPs, GPs. I do believe that we will do the next round on the SFDR webinar with even more deeper approach on the way of use of the tool and how can benefit. In the meantime, after this webinar, please be aware that we will send you a survey. And if you would like to be contacted by Fabio and team, and if you have still any questions, we would be very happy to address it. And yeah, so with regards to the time, we are slightly delayed, but it's really a super hot topic. I would like to Thanks, Fabio, to you and Legance to be our partners, to be one of the best in class on SFDR and support all our clients as well. I'm wishing you all the best, very good day, and we stay in touch. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Grazie, Anna.